lots of like, really, I had it like, it was crazy. I woke up my friend's lots of a few days later to like after watching it. I got a hot water. I've like never had time in my life. I know. Yeah, I think I don't know. It's like good ever since 2 years now. Yeah, probably type 1, right? Yeah.
Okay. You guys hear me all right?
I have it right now.
There's still some. Better? Better? Okay. All right. So, we're going to back up a tad because I wasn't super happy with how quickly things wound down on Wednesday. I felt like we were rushed. I was rushed. Okay, so I just want to back up to CTE. Okay? And I thought we would start with a movie trailer.
When I was a boy, heaven was here, and America was here. You could be anything, you could do anything. I am the wrong person to have discovered this.
If you don't speak for them, who will?
I found a disease that no one has ever seen. Repetitive head trauma chokes the brain. The NFL does not want to talk to you. You turned on the lights and gave their biggest boogeyman a name.
You're going to war with a corporation that owns a day of the week.
No proof was presented today because the assembly isn't vetted.
They have to listen to us. This is bigger than they are. What do you think they're doing to you now? That's nothing. You have no idea how bad this could get. They have to keep going.
They want you to say you made it all up.
If they continue to deny my work, men continue to die.
Sometimes in life, you're asked to lead alone. But sometimes you can't. Who are you?
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth.
All right. So, sorry. Get my label maker out. I wanted to start with this because we were ending last week and we were running a little low on time. Or I was running a little low on time. And I felt like I was kind of pushing to try to get to that break point. And I promised you guys I wouldn't do that. So let's back up. Okay? So chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. So the movie's Hollywoodized, but it's based off of a real individual. He was a Nigerian-American physician, a forensic pathologist, and he didn't discover a disease that had never been discovered before. So that line that Will Smith said isn't exactly true. This condition has been actually known in the boxing world. And in 1928, it was first described by Dr. Harrison Martland. And I think I told you that fact on Wednesday, but probably as packs are getting loaded and you guys are running out the door. And it was referred to as punch-drunk syndrome, like boxers punch. And they acted like they were intoxicated, but they weren't. And there was no autopsies. We didn't have the knowledge of autopsies in the 20s. And so these were in pugilists and boxers. Right? Pugilism is the name of the formal term for boxing. And so that's been pretty well described for years, almost 100 years ago. But what Dr. Bennett Omalu, who Will Smith is playing in this movie, what he discovered in NFL players post-autopsy, and that's what the movie is characterizing, is he discovered physical evidence of traumatic brain injury in the brain tissue on autopsy. Like to such an extent where you could tell something was wrong with the brain tissue. Like there was necrotic brain tissue on autopsy. And some of the symptoms of what we call chronic traumatic encephalopathy is like impaired judgment, very aggressive behavior that doesn't make any sense, dementia, and depression. So you see at the very bottom here, memory loss, impulsive, erratic behavior. You saw somebody with a gun. So the movie is an interesting movie, knowing what you know, and it's actually based off of a true story. It's a little Hollywoodized, but you can look up Dr. Bennett Omalu, who I think Will does an amazing job of portraying. He's a very talented actor. This is a role that he's never really done before, nothing quite like this. From Fresh Prince to Aladdin, and then you have a forensic pathologist. I mean, that's a lot of talent. Okay. I'm actually not even joking around. Like I'm really a fan. Like it's pretty impressive to watch that level of capability in an actor. And so you've got memory loss, impulsive, erratic behavior, impaired judgment, aggression, depression, balance issues, and an early onset of dementia. And some of these NFL players ended up committing suicide because they just felt like they didn't know themselves anymore. So it's a rough movie to watch, and but again, I think it's important because it's somewhat of a newly discovered disease, and now there's all sorts of new rules post this discovery in the NFL. Okay, all sorts of new rules, and I've been at parties where people are like, "I'm going to let them play football for crying out loud." I mean, I've heard people say that. Well, the reason that they're saying that is because they don't understand what you guys have the opportunity to learn. So that's your opportunity in the Super Bowl party to say, hey, we're actually trying to protect the health of these players so they can actually play. I mean, it may not be as entertaining for you, and you want, kind of like the old Roman games, but we're a little more sophisticated now. So we, you can't target certain players, you can't you can't lead with the helmet. There's all sorts of different rules now as a result of our knowledge on this. There's also a thought today that Muhammad Ali, and I talked about Muhammad Ali with Parkinson's, and we talked about Parkinson's. Well, there's thinking that he actually had two diseases. There's a theory that he had two diseases. One was he developed Parkinson's, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, probably accurate. But could there have been CTE involved as well? It's very possible. Like, could that have aggravated the Parkinson's in Muhammad Ali? Okay. So this is progressive degenerative disease in patients with repeated concussions. We talked about concussions. They're of the categories of brain trauma. They're the lowest level. But then we asked, or one of your colleagues asked, about repetitive concussions. Okay, and that's where there becomes a big issue. Traumatic brain injuries. Used to be thought, like we talked about, in pugilists or boxers, and the brain atrophies and shrinks over time. And in other areas, it enlarges where there's a lot of scar tissue. And like we see with Alzheimer's, we get these tau plaque proteins accumulating in the brain tissue. And so I just wanted to pause, and another event happened between last Wednesday and today, over the weekend. So my daughter had a concussion playing soccer up in the White Mountains and was rushed to the hospital up in the White Mountains. And so that, along with actually one of your colleagues in the room, has been on concussion protocol from a really bad accident. Like, this is kind of a big deal these days in contact sports. And a lot of people don't realize how big of a deal it can be. Okay, so it's our job to educate. It's going to be your job to educate. And sometimes it just looks like a Super Bowl party. You pass the chips, and why can't these pansies play football anymore? Like, well, you know, do you understand kind of what these consequences are? I mean, it's not just about hitting hard and taking cheap shots. It's about making sure that we protect our athletes, okay? So I think I did show this information of Dr. Bennett Omalu. He was the one that coined the term CTE. And he was the one that had physical evidence, not just behavioral evidence, that there was an issue associated with repetitive head trauma. Okay, and he was under tremendous scrutiny for it. Almost lost his license, almost got deported, because he was actually here on a work visa. He wasn't even American born, from what I remember. Okay, and that's the link of it's a great movie. How many of you have actually seen the movie? Okay, just see, that's the thing. It's just a handful. I think it's a great movie to watch. It's more educational than it is entertaining. Okay, but knowing what you guys know and the field that you're going into, you know, and it's funny, like the number two, so number one head trauma is boxers, and then number two is football players. Okay, competitive football, and then that's for guys. Okay, for gals, the number one head trauma situation happens to be soccer. Okay, they just hit their head a lot. So I showed this image, and I think everyone was shuffling out of the room, and this is where we ended the lecture. And so you can see this is advanced CTE. And it was autopsy that Omalu discovered, and then he started going through brain scans. In the 1920s, you didn't have the ability to do a brain scan on a boxer. Today, you can do a brain scan and determine if you have any issues associated with size of the brain or lesions. And so my daughter had a brain scan up in Springerville on, what day was it? It was on Thursday. Oh no, it was Wednesday night. It was the night after this lecture, ironically enough. So, all right, so that's where we left off last Wednesday. I wanted just to kind of recap that so we weren't rushing through it. Any questions on nervous system disorders, and then we'll move on to the next lecture.